Hello, everybody. Hello, and welcome to Side Hustle Ideas. I'm Bill, the company's expert. Thank you for joining me today. This is the weekly live stream where we talk all about entrepreneurship. So if you are someone who wants to do a side hustle or have your own business, any kind of version of that, you come to the right place. This is where we talk about it. This is primarily a Q&A. So if you are a subscriber to my channel and you are watching me on some kind of a device, and you've been a subscriber for any amount of time, you should be able to see a chat box somewhere nearby, near the video feed, and you can get in there and ask me questions. This is Side Hustles episode number 112. So we've done 112 of these things. And this is how to start a side hustle and make money with former CEO. That's me. So welcome. Yes, a special shout out goes out to my YouTube channel members, as always, and my Patreons. You guys are awesome. Also to my super thanks donors. Those are always nice to get. And to you, my viewers and participants, thank you for being here. Just to start off, on a personal note, this weekend I had to work pretty steadily on Saturday and Sunday because I did a software update on my computer for the streaming software that I'm using now, Streamlabs. And what a fool I was to have agreed to update my software, because for absolutely no gain, it completely messed up my computer. I had to uninstall everything, reinstall everything, mess around with it. So it was fun. Several hours of work just to undo the damage I did with one mouse click. What a poor fool I was, and I will not be making that same mistake again. So hopefully you can hear me okay, you can see me okay, because there was touch and go there for a moment. So there you go. So to lead us off, I would like to talk about a couple of basic business concepts, so that if you are thinking of doing a side hustle, maybe you're doing it because you have a creative flair, you want to do your own thing, you don't want to work as an employee your whole life, or you're just in it to get the extra revenue stream to supplement your income, whatever the motivation is, or a combination of the two. I'm going to talk about that. We're getting into. I don't really do this on this stream, but I think I should. So you guys tell me. And somebody says hi. So hi. Someone has an alphanumeric name. Unikrishanan 6020. And that's only what your friends call you. So that's good. Thank you for being here. Okay, so as always, issue a live challenge to everybody. If you have a side hustle idea that you think is awesome, put it in the chat and we can kick it around if you wish. But let's talk about kind of the basics here that a lot of people are still struggling with, the difference between value, price, and cost. A lot of beginners don't know kind of what those are, or what differentiates them exactly. Let's talk about it. So hopefully everybody knows what the price is. The price is kind of, the sale price for something, how much it costs. Basically, the price is essentially what the customers pay, right? So what they pay for your thing. And what is your thing? Well, your thing is something that produces value, right? Value is something that is worth money. Like, how much money is it worth? If it's worth money, then it has value, right? That means somebody's prepared to pay for it. So value, you could think of it as what it's worth to the customer. So if you're producing something, you're either making a product or you're providing a service. The big question is, what is this worth to the customer, right? And that goes into a whole discussion of itself about what problem it solves. Do customers see it as a problem? Would they find a solution very, very important to them, in which case they would pay more money for it? Or do they not really see it as a problem, therefore they wouldn't pay very much, right? So the value to the customer kind of goes down. So it's more of a perception thing, right? That's what the value is. But the price is the actual sticker price that the customers do pay. Okay, so, and then the other critical thing is cost. Cost is different from the price. You would not believe how many people mess this up. Even, beyond the beginner stage, people still confuse those two concepts. right? You have the price, which is what you charge, and then you have the cost, which is what it costs you to make. So the idea is that the difference between the price and the cost, you could say that's your profit, right? From an accounting sense, that's your profit, right? So what it costs you is not the same thing as the price. Now, this concept alone leads to a lot of very basic rookie mistakes that a lot of people starting businesses, they mess up. A classic problem for people that start businesses is they undercharge for what they're doing. They think, oh no, I don't want to charge too much money because, this is just something I'm doing, and how much money could it be really worth? But then their costs exceed that amount. You know what I'm saying? So the problem is that you have to have your price above your cost. So if your cost is, I don't know, $10 a unit, your price is going to be at least $10 a unit, preferably starting, after a little margin, maybe $12 a unit, something like that, right? A common problem would be people saying, well, I'm going to charge $2 a unit because it's just my stuff, right? And it's like, no, that's the wrong thinking. If your stuff is of value, then people will pay for it. But if, there's one thing you have to get right is you have to accurately estimate all your costs, not just the immediate costs, but the entire cost of the entire thing. You have to understand, you have to capture those and factor those in and get a true value of what your cost is. And if you're doing it like you're selling a product, like your cost per unit, and you figure you could sell this many units in a month or something. So you need to include all of that, and then you need to set the price higher. That's what you need to do. Now, the big question is, will the customers pay that much? In which case, then the conversation turns to value. What is it worth to them, right? How much would they be prepared to pay? If you positioned it a certain way, they would see the value in that and want to pay more. If you didn't draw attention to those things, maybe they don't see the value in it, and then they're not willing to pay that much. You know what I mean? So these are three distinct concepts: price, cost, and value, right? Learn the definitions of those if you don't already know them and understand kind of the implications there. Magic Beans is here. Magic Beans says, hi, Bill. Thanks for taking these sessions. You're absolutely welcome, Magic Beans. I enjoy talking about this stuff. And I welcome your questions. That's what really drives these things. Kartiki Jup 8294 says, that toy may have originated from a hobby in free time. How my full-time employer would like to see that. I mean, how they perceive that. That's almost a coherent thought. I'm not sure what precisely you mean, so I'm having difficulty answering that. First of all, we're not here talking about employment. That's not really part of this. But since you asked, generally employers are not super thrilled to learn all about the fact that you're doing a side hustle. So just keep that in mind. I wouldn't blab what you're doing on the side to your employer. It's not that there's anything necessarily wrong with it. It's just that they would like to be your sole income source. That way they have the most power over you, and you care more about pleasing them than you would otherwise if you've got other things going on the side, right? Okay, I see it jumped on me. Just as I started to read, it moved up. So it says, hi, Bill, how do you evaluate a toy as a side hustle? That toy originated from a hobby work. How do you see that? It doesn't matter where it originated from. It doesn't matter if it originated as a hobby. It doesn't matter if it originated as a very specific scheme to make money. It doesn't matter if it's an idea that, just occurred to you, late night on Friday after you had 14 beers. It doesn't matter if it was the result of 5 years intensive research. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter where it comes from. The only thing that's relevant is how much value it has to a customer, right? So, you know what I mean? It doesn't matter where it comes from. What matters is what you do with it, right? Now, you could take a brilliant idea, and many people have done this throughout history. They have an absolutely brilliant idea, like innovative, like light years ahead of its time, goes on to change the world, you know. But when they first tell someone about it, that person goes, who would want that? You know what I mean? Now, my point is not that that person is stupid or something. My point is that to one person, that has no value. But to another person, that is incredibly valuable, right? So if you have an idea, or you have a product, or you have a skill, or you have whatever, right, that you're wanting to make money from, right? And you show one person, maybe your spouse, maybe your brother, maybe your friend, maybe your parent, you know, I don't know. And they go, who cares? You know, why would anyone want that? That doesn't necessarily mean it's a bad idea, right? If you're making something very specific that only appeals to a very specific type of customer, and that's like 99% of all the products and services out there, they don't appeal to everybody. They only appeal to a subset of people, right? You need to get that product or service or idea or whatever it is in front of the type of people that would place value on it, right? So, for example, like even the idea of like, I don't know, a real estate agent, you know, something very mundane and it's been around forever. You know, do you need real estate agents? Well, yeah, obviously some people do. That's why they make money, right? Does everyone need a real estate agent? No. A lot of people aren't looking to buy a house, you know, so it doesn't apply to them. So therefore they don't care, right? Other people, they're looking to buy a house, but they don't need someone to do the groundwork for them. They're perfectly capable of doing it themselves, and they want to do it themselves. So a real estate agent has no value for them, right? But of the people that want to buy a house, or, you know, whatever people buy from a real estate agent, real estate, I guess, you know, of those people, a subset of them could use the services of a real estate agent, right? They say to themselves, I don't want to do any of the groundwork. I just want someone to, like, you know, take care of all this work for me. Tell me what's the best option. I just say, yes, go with it. And then they just handle everything. You know what I mean? So like for me, a real estate agent would be very valuable, right? So if you got your idea of this radical new idea, this free thinking liberal idea of this real estate agent idea in front of those people, they would be like, you know, that's exactly what I've been looking for. That's exactly what I've been wishing for. And then they will pay you a lot of money to provide that, right? You know, but to other people, it's worth zero, right? So that's the idea of marketing. Marketing is the study of, you know, customers and potential customers. The idea that, you know, you want to get your stuff out there. It's basically the study of how to make something popular, right? So you want to get the word out, and you don't want to just tell people that fundamentally don't care about it. You want to target it to the right people. You got to find out who they are, you got to find out where they are, and you got to find out, like, what message would they respond to. If I wrote the message onto a stone tablet in hieroglyphics and hit them over the head with it, would that result in a sale? In a sale? I don't know if it would result in a stale, but it might result in a sale if you hit them hard enough, I guess. Would that be the right way of doing it? Or would they need to see an ad? Or would they need to have someone explain it to them? Someone that they trust with a understanding face and a deep, gravelly voice, you know? Right? So that's the idea. So it doesn't matter. So anyway, that long rambling trip to nowhere, that was basically about the toy idea. It doesn't matter if it's a hobby or not. Okay. Don't tell your employer about it. Okay. All things being equal, it might create more problems than it solves. Okay. And I think that was your question in a very roundabout kind of way. How do you say this? Lisa Anderson? It's almost like Leisa, which is a nice twist. That's a kind of an exotic twist, very exotic name. Leisa says, with the increase of inflation, a second job or side hustle has become popular to make ends meet, literally. Yeah, it's not just inflation, it's a bunch of other things. Yeah, economic conditions. Magic Beans says, I made a product, software/tool, and made 3 sales for for $20 each in 7 days. How do you know if a product is something people want? Is 3 sales enough to consider it something people want? Well, it's not a binary thing, like, yes, go with it, spend millions on it, or no, don't bother. What that does is, if you can make 3 sales in 7 days, going to how much, like, what was the size of your target market? Like, did you tell 10 people about it and 3 of them bought it? The question I would have is, are those people connected to you? Is it friends and family? Because if it is, I would say it's, like, no offense, but it's useless. Because people in that case will be buying the product because it's you, not because of the product itself, right? So what you need to do is, like, that's encouraging, that's good. You would then take the next step. Now, the next step could either be going to people you don't know in some way, shape, or form. That would be like the big hurdle. Can you get someone who doesn't know you buying it, right? That would be very meaningful, right? So if you could get 3 people you don't know buying it, that would be a major step forward. If these 3 people are people you're not connected to, then okay, go to a bigger set, get some more awareness out there among this particular targeted group, like this target market, and see if you can do more than 3 sales. See if you can do 30, right? And see if the ratios are proportional, right? The way you do this in marketing is there's things called exposures, right? Where one person sees the message once. Maybe you have a sign like, buy my stuff, that's out on the street or something, or in a mall or whatever. How many people walk by it that read it, that look at it? Every hour, maybe, 100 people like see it, right? So that's an exposure. If the same person walks by again and sees it a second time, that's another exposure, right? So the question is, how many exposures does one need to take the next step down the marketing funnel? Like, if you're aware of it and, you think, the next step is to go, hey, I'm interested in that. That looks interesting. I'm going to see if I can learn more about it. That caught my attention, right? So, like that's how marketing works. They talk about exposures and all this kind of stuff. So, and then what awareness it produces and all this. And is the awareness like in your targeted market, or is it just people outside that you're not targeting, that it's irrelevant to? Things like that, right? So it's not a yes or no answer. The point is, it's a process. If they pass step 1, you move on to step 2. If they pass step 2, you move on to step 3. And the sort of size of it goes increasingly larger as you go. No, it's pronounced Lisa. Okay, fair enough. Not a problem. So Lisa, I apologize for bastardizing your name. Magic Bean says they were complete strangers, like 150 visitors to my site. The product is free to use, but people can buy a premium version, which is what 3 people bought. Excellent. Okay, right on. So, I don't know what the details are, but the next step would be getting more people to your site to see if you can like 10x this or something. So obviously one of the things in doing that is figuring out who these people are, who are the ones that came to your site, then who are the people that bought your thing. If there's some way to get people to fill out like an answer to 1 or 2 questions during the purchase process, that would be nice. If there's like web logs or something like that, you can analyze to see who is it exactly that's coming to my site, this sort of thing. There's other things you can do to try and get that information. So you would try and get that, but a major thing is to not have full and accurate information. So you just probe the market. You try things. We're going to like put an ad here. Now, has my site traffic gone up? Or maybe my site traffic hasn't gone up in terms of volume, but my sales have gone up. So maybe it's not that there's more people coming, but it's a more relevant bunch of people that are coming, right? and things like this, right? So you would do more research and then you try to drive more traffic. So what could you do to promote your website? Could you talk about it in, places people congregate online, like on social media or whatever? I don't know. You would have to think about what your options are, what you can do, what stuff is relatively free and easy to do that you can do if there's some way to like 10x the amount of traffic you're getting. Maybe one mention to one person in a software company might 10x that, or to somebody who's going to then take that and publicize it or propagate it or something like that, right? So, there's a lot of different things you can do depending on what you're trying to sell and who it applies to. You go to a trade show, you go to, if it's software, there's a lot of conferences and trade shows and things like that to do with IT and, business solutions or like if it's a consumer thing, maybe it's a video game, I don't know, that kind of world, right? So the point is you immerse yourself in that and you see like, okay, what can I do? And then how can I gauge how effective it is? Okay, so one thing at a time, and then you see if, it changes your web traffic or something. That'd be the most basic form of it. But that's good. They're complete strangers, so that's a major step forward. So that suggests that there's some value there. The only question now is, can you charge more than your cost so you can make it at a profit, and can you drive enough volume to it where you're still making a profit? Right? Now, the other thing you might want to probe is how much people are prepared to pay. If you made 3 sales at this price point, maybe it turns out that it's quite inelastic. You could like charge 50% more and still make 3 sales. You know what I mean? Or you find that you charge 10% more and you make 0. You know what I mean? So you would do these kinds of probes, right? Get the best information you can by looking at what others do, and then try things, actually probe what you're doing. Okay, does that make sense? We got 16 people here. Thank you for being here. Ooh, I see that my chat window up there is broken. So, okay, that's good. This is a problem I had before when Streamlabs upgraded their software. They broke everything. And what they actually did is they changed settings inside my software. So they upgraded and then they changed my settings like on the download. So under the hood, all your settings have been changed and it's resulted in turning things off like that. So mental note, I have to undo that. If I can figure it out. Okay, here's a radical new concept for everybody. I talked about value versus price versus cost, some basic. It's basic in that, you define it for beginners, but understanding it is actually a very advanced thing and its implications. Okay, so here's another concept, cash flow versus profit. If you don't have a financial background, you don't have an accounting background, maybe you don't know the difference between profit and cash flow, right? They're 2 different things. We already kind of discussed what profit was. Profit is the difference, technically, between your cost and your price, right? So if it costs you $10 to make something, but you're charging $15 for it, your profit is $15 or $5 a unit, right? Because there's $5 difference between $10 and $15, right? So that's what your profit technically is, right? The problem, though, is that in the real world, the timing of these things matter, right? So if you have to spend money up front to produce, say, a product, you've got to buy the raw materials, pay for the tools, pay for the utilities like, electricity, whatever, do the work, so like labor cost, right? Get it into stores, whatever, distribution cost. You're having to pay that up front. And that's before you've sold anything, right? Now, if you're successful and you sell these products, then you get paid later, right? But the problem is that right now, you went into the hole, you paid money to produce these products, before you sold them. Therefore, you're running at a loss. Like you would need some kind of debt or some other kind of injection of money to make this work, right? So the timing really matters. So for example, let's say that you get your product on the shelves in a store and they don't sell until 6 months later. You know, you have to wait 6 months before making a cent, right? Or making anything, depending on what part of the world you are in, making a Peruvian dollar, because that's totally a thing. It's Care Bear money, actually. So, you know what I mean? There's a difference there. So cash flow is something else other than profit. What cash flow is, that's like looking at the balance in your checking account, right? How much money has flowed in and out of your bank account. So you have a situation where, you know, you might have sold, I don't know, 100 units of your product. Okay, but you haven't received the money from those sales yet. It takes another month for them to get the money into your checking account by bank transfers and all this kind of stuff, right? Or purchase conditions or, you know, whatever, right? So what you're looking at now is you look at the cash flow in your bank account. Your cash flow is negative because you've had to buy all the materials and pay for the building of the product, and you've sold them. But if you look at your bank balance right now, it's at zero or less than zero, right? Because you haven't received any money yet. So the cash flow in that case would be negative. It's negative cash flow. Money's flowing out, but nothing's flowing in. And then maybe on month 3 or month 1 or whatever it is, you start getting cash flow coming in. You have a positive cash flow. So that's cash flow. That's where the timings of these transactions matter, right? So very important concept for people just starting out. You know, this kills a lot of businesses that start. Okay, you get a situation where you're technically profitable, but you still went broke, right? Because you had to pay money now, but you didn't receive your payments until much later, and that's what killed you. Okay, that's when you talk about concepts like burn rate. If you're trying to get a business off the ground, you know, it takes a while. You got to pay for a lot of things first, right out of the gate, before you make any money. So your burn rate's going to be very high. And then other concepts like your runway. How many months does that buy you, you know, before you need to get positive cash flow, money coming into your bank account, right? So that's something that's a concept that has sunk many, you know, an enterprising entrepreneur, because they, you know, yes, on paper you're profitable, but in terms of your bank account, you've hit zero and then you've gone into overdraft and then you maxed out. Sorry, you know, and then you died before you could produce the product and get them into stores. So that's the idea. Okay, get in the chat. This is primarily a Q&A. Got 16 people here. Thank you for being here. Let's see here. Magic Beans says, thanks, Bill. You're welcome, Magic Beans. Side note, your advice helped me land a great job at a bank. Okay, awesome. Thank you. I'm trying these little side quests during my leisure morning hours. That's good, Magic Beans. You will have not just a steady job, so presumably steady money coming in, but you will have a steady stream of knowledge, of things that you're learning. I think that people who have some kind of entrepreneurship experience, they're much more aware of how the world works, of how people work. You know, they're not quite nearly as naive as the average person. You know, they have an awareness of the realities of a lot of things, and that's incredible experience. Whether it's successful or not, it's good, hands down, to just learn about it and try stuff. You know, you will win just by trying it, you know. Obviously, if you succeed at it, it's even more valuable, but, you know, anything you do in this space is going to be like a major learning experience. Stuff that they don't teach you in school, stuff that, like, not a lot of people know because most people haven't tried this kind of thing. So yeah. Way to go. Okay, get in the chat. This is primarily Q&A, me just responding to your questions. I suppose in the meantime, I could talk about something else. We talked about price versus cost versus value. Okay. We talked about cash flow versus profit just a moment ago. Other useful topics are fixed cost versus variable cost. You know, when you're starting something, a big decision you're going to have to make is, you know, am I going to systematize what I'm doing? You know, in which case I'm going to incur big fixed costs to set up a system, almost like, think of it figuratively as like an assembly line, right? You're going to set up an assembly line to create these products or provide this service, right? So that means you have big fixed costs to put this system in place. But then once it's in place, you can crank out the products or crank out the services. And what that means is that your cost per unit, your variable cost, goes way down, right? And that's what the big fixed costs at the beginning bought you, right? So for example, you could make, let's say, I don't know, you're producing arts and crafts or something, and you're doing it in, your garage or your living room or something like that, and you're doing it all by hand, right? You're using the tools you have lying around that were lying around your house, maybe those crappy little screwdrivers and a pen knife and something like that. You know, you're just using whatever tools are around, and you can do it. You can create this beautiful art type affair, this thing that people look at and they go, oh, gee, ain't that pretty, you know, and it gives them value, right? But it's very labor intensive to make these. You're making them all by hand. You're using very inefficient tools. So each one is a real ordeal. Each unit of these products is a real ordeal for you to produce. So it's very high per unit cost, very high variable cost. But you had practically no fixed costs. You just started one day using whatever you had lying around. Absolutely no cost to start this up, right? So that's one advantage, is that if it sells or it doesn't sell, you didn't really risk much, right? That's a good thing. However, if it takes off, you might have problems meeting the demand, and you might have to charge a large amount per unit because it's taken you a long time to create beautiful art with a penknife and a screwdriver. I'm not saying it can't be done. You know, you put a rusted blunt screwdriver in the hands of some people, and they can create the Mona Lisa. Don't ask me how. Other people, all they can do is hit someone over the head with it, which is, you know, what you would expect. Alternatively, you could say, I'm serious about this. I'm not going to make beautiful art with whatever tools I have lying around. I'm going to renovate my home. I'm going to turn it into some kind of art studio craft space. I'm going to buy the best tools available. I'm going to buy the best lighting available. I'm going to even pay a person to sit in the corner and whisper nurturing, encouraging things to me as I work, right? So that, you know, I'm motivated to do this, right? That's where the real money is. So I'm investing a lot of money into setting this up. So I've got huge fixed costs, right? But then the idea is that once I start producing these, whatever they are, you know, little glass figurines that I create that make people happy, I'll be able to just bang them out like an assembly line. So very low variable costs, very low cost per unit, but I had to spend a small fortune to set up this production line. That's the idea. So it's a trade-off. So which should you do? And the general, the conventional wisdom is that you, in the beginning, you minimize fixed cost. Okay, you start with whatever you have around, whatever you can do. Okay, without really spending that much money on it, just as a proof of concept. And then if there's demand, then you consider investing in systematizing what you're doing. So maybe more fixed costs, right? Buying bigger pieces of equipment that, you know, shave time off the process of creating these things. And you end up with something where the unit cost goes down, right? Now, there's other factors too. There's risk factor. If your demand is very volatile, you sell 30 in the first week, but in week 2 you sell 0, right? Then the idea is you don't invest in fixed cost, because fixed cost, you have to pay for it no matter what. Variable cost, you only pay for it when you're making units, presumably, that you can sell. So the safer option is to not focus on fixed cost, to have higher variable costs. And although that isn't great long term, that reduces risk. Hopefully that makes sense. Mehmet Opiaka. That's an awesome name. Says, how to do market search for an e-commerce business? What e-commerce business? You gotta be much more specific than that. Where are you? What are you trying to sell? What customers are you trying to attract? Because there isn't a one-size-fits-all answer. It varies considerably. If you let me know that, we can maybe see if we can get into that. Guido says, it would be great to have something that has rather high initial cost and allows you to produce cheaper units later on. Laser or cutting machines fall in that category, but you have high maintenance. Yeah, well, that's the thing. And that's assuming that, it's a sure thing. You spend money on your laser cutter or whatever, presumably anticipating you're going to be making many units of whatever it is, and that assumes that you can sell them, right? What you don't want is to just assume you can sell them, go spend a small fortune on a laser cutter, start making units, you make like 150 units of these things, now you have to sell them, then you find you can't even sell one, right? That would be unfortunate. And that's a situation that I've seen many startup founders and small business founders fall into. So the preferable thing is to make it without a laser cutter, just make 1 or 2, and then see if you can sell them. And if you can, then you might want to consider upgrading, or what might be more prudent is to say, okay, I've sold 2, let's make 10 by hand and see if I can sell those. And if I can, then okay, maybe it's worth considering upgrading in some way, shape, or form. Right? You want to validate your idea. That's what that initial phase of a business is all about. It's about validating it. You have this theory that it should work. Put your money where your mouth is. Let's verify that. That's the validation stage. If you don't, you race ahead into a major financial mistake. That's usually how it goes. Just as a reminder, for people that want to learn business, I have this course, the $100 MBA. Check that out. Best bang for the buck anywhere. You learn everything that you would learn in a 2 years master's degree. It's a full program. It's a reading list. You read the same material that they study in places like Harvard Business School in their MBA program. Some of the best books from all over the world that are taught in the top MBA programs around the world. You can get them on Amazon. The key is knowing which one to get. And you can buy all of them all brand new. You pay more money for that. Or you could buy like slightly older editions for like absolutely peanuts. Like literally $5 a book kind of thing. And then I provide a lot of videos. I guide you through it. And I point out like, okay, here's the more important stuff. Here's maybe the less important stuff. And then I share a lot of experiences and insights from my career. So if you're looking for that, if that's the kind of thing you're looking for, you get the same knowledge as you would get in an actual 2-year master's program in business, Master's of Business Administration. But it's entirely on your own terms, on your own schedule. You can read this stuff whenever you want. And you can go as deep as you want. So if you just want to skim it, you could do that. If you want to go very deep, do every practice problem and like look at all the answer keys, you could do that too. So that's the way it works. So check that out if you're wanting to learn business. Business is the scientific study of how to make money. That's what it is. So useful to know for multiple different reasons. Check it out. If you're interested, there's a link in the description box below this live stream. And there's a link to the course, and then there's a link to a video that describes the course, so you see how it works and what you get and all that. So check that out. It's a pretty popular course. A lot of people have taken that from me. So yeah, I created it precisely for entrepreneurs because I kind of resented how a lot of schools were, they're selling this knowledge, which is a good thing, but they're like artificially inflating the price way more than they should. 90% of the information, if not more, is in the public domain. You shouldn't have to cost you 6 figures, or at the cheaper end 5 figures to get this knowledge. You know what I mean? For what it's worth, I have an MBA, so I'm just recreating it. Anyway, check that out. Guido says, I like that you push validation first. Yes. Oh, it's very important. I tend to jump in head first and just overanalyze instead of doing baby steps. Iteration is the key. Listen, Guido, if you have a great idea, which you may have, like it happens, the validation should be relatively easy and it should produce the desired result. With a lot of these business models, like, these businesses that people do as side hustles, or they sometimes skip that stage and just jump to doing a full-time, full-blown business, whichever way, shape, or form, the thing that they stumble over is the validation. What you may not realize is that if you're running that kind of business or that kind of operation, what you're really in the business of doing is understanding your customers. If you understand who these people are that would want this thing, you understand where they are, you understand how to reach them, you understand how these people think, then you really clean up. It would be not much of a challenge, really. You know exactly what to say over what medium. You know exactly how to get it in front of the exact people that would go, I'll take 2, right? You knew exactly how much they were prepared to pay, et cetera, right? If you knew all that, this wouldn't be much of a challenge, So that's really the business that you're in when you start a business. You're in the business of understanding your customers, these particular group of people, what makes them tick, how do they think, what are they looking for, what are their attitudes, what are their preconceived notions, where are they looking, what do they pay attention to, what do they not pay attention to, what persuades them, what doesn't persuade them. That's what you're in the business of learning. And whoever does that best wins, So that's why the validation stage is very important, because you're like taking your first steps into doing that. You might understand the product itself. You might understand the service itself. You may understand that, people should want this. But really, you have no proof. You have no hard knowledge of who specifically these people are. Where are they? How much would they be prepared to pay, etc. So going out and getting that knowledge is what this is all about, right? And it starts with that validation stage. And if the results are telling you that, like, no, this is not going as you predicted, then it's very important that you figure out why and try something else. You need to solve these problems as you go. Or else, like we were kind of talking about with the fixed cost thing, you end up going out and spending astronomical amounts of money on things that it turns out either you didn't need or are ineffective or both. And then you're dead. You spent a whole ton of money on something, it didn't pay off, you can't pay it off, you're done. You know what I mean? So that's why it's good to start off small, get the knowledge first, and then as you get the knowledge, you turn it into profit. And Bob's your uncle, as many a business person has said. Let's do something fun. I always kind of trot out ChatGPT when we're doing these things. partly also I want to test my computer to make sure this still works. But you brought up a good point. Okay, so in terms of entrepreneurship, or in terms of starting a side hustle, the validation phase, what are the reasons why you would do it? Why is it important? And what are the risks you run if you don't do any kind of validation? And what's it for? Like, validating what? What's the danger of not doing a validation? Just to give us some talking points here, and you guys can tell me what you think. I'm going to make it a little bit bigger. For old people like me whose eyes have gone. Okay, so what the validation phase is for. The validation phase exists to answer one brutal question: does anyone actually want this badly enough to give me something for it? Right? Very important. Oh, and by the way, you need to validate it by going to people other than your friends and family. That's, hopefully everybody understands that. A lot of people will buy it just, almost like charity, almost like they're being polite because they know you, right? That's not the same thing as validating it. It has to come from people you don't know, that you have no connection to, right? Because that's something that you could then reproduce, right? Okay, yes, and you have to charge money for it. It's not about getting people to compliment it. That compliment costs nothing, right? But if people are willing to pay for it, that's a real signal that this is something that has value. Okay, what you're validating? Okay, you're trying to validate that the problem actually exists. It's not just you having this problem, it's other people too, right? The problem is painful enough that people care about it. Okay, your proposed solution makes sense, and not just to you, to other people who aren't you, who don't think like you. Do they think it makes sense? That's the big question. Okay, so they'll pay for it, right? They'll commit to it, whatever. And you're aiming at the right customer. Once again, you could have a valid idea, but you're targeting the wrong people. You're selling, this radical new concept of a real estate agent. You're trying to promote that to people that don't even want to buy a house, or they don't want to buy any real estate. So it's like they're going to turn it down. It's not going to sell, not because it's a bad idea, but because the target market is mismatched. And by the way, market means your audience, your group of potential customers. That's what that word means. That's what a market is. Okay, so why validation is important? Because most side hustles don't fail due to execution. They fail because there's no real demand, or demand exists but not for that solution. Right? Demand exists but not for that price, or the wrong audience entirely. Okay, so you want to make sure that you might have a brilliant thing you've created, but you want to make sure that these are, what you think the answer to these questions is in fact how it works. That's what you're validating. And I agree with all this, by the way. Sometimes ChatGPT gets it wrong. Sometimes it doesn't give you the best answer. So far, these have been pretty much bang on. The real reasons people don't validate, people skip validation because validation can disprove their idea. It's too much hassle, basically. Talking to real people is awkward. This is the thing. People shy, especially technical people, introverted people, they shy away from the sales part of it, right? Thinking that, that'll just somehow be solved later, somehow, through some mechanism, right? But they don't know what it is. That's a very dangerous game to play, because usually what happens is it doesn't get solved later, and you've just wasted all your time and effort and money creating something that you don't know how to sell, so it fails, right? If you front load this problem at the beginning, then you save, if it is going to fail, then you save all your money and effort, right? Creating it and perfecting it, right? And if it isn't going to fail, if it's going to be a big success, you see signs of that at the beginning, and that helps you proceed in a more efficient way. Okay, the risks of not validating. I think this is pretty obvious. Building something nobody wants. So you might want it, but unfortunately nobody else sees it like that. Solving the wrong problem. Okay, targeting the wrong audience. That's a big one. and pricing fantasy. Like you think that people would pay $1 million for it. Turns out they don't feel like paying that much. They only want to pay you $10 for it. So if you had known that at the start, you might have done things differently or not done this at all. Burning confidence. When something fails after months of work, people don't say the idea wasn't validated. They say, I'm bad at business. Yeah, exactly. Or they just say, I'm a horrible, horrible person and I should, go jump off a bridge, which you shouldn't. You're just learning, right? And you already, by doing that much, by the way, you've learned so much more than most people ever will about this kind of stuff and about how the world works. What validation doesn't guarantee, okay, it doesn't necessarily guarantee success, but it reduces risk and it increases the likelihood that you're going to succeed. Okay? So without validation, you're guessing. This is very true. I wish a lot of startup founders and things I had worked with would have seen this. You are guessing without validation. Your confidence is imaginary. Your risk is hidden. With validation, you are testing. Confidence is evidence-based. And risk is visible and manageable. If you can't sell it, you need to solve that problem first, figure out how to sell it, then you can go full speed ahead. Okay? So I actually agree with the vast majority of this. I think that's really good. Okay, getting back to the chat, we have some more questions here. Guido says, I recently read the MOM test. Okay, it's about the that exact problem. Especially friends and family often lie to you in the validation phase, not always intentionally though. Yeah, you can't use friends and family to validate anything because, the reality is that there's an element of trust between a customer and a producer, right? The customer trusts that this thing that they're buying will do what it's purported to do, right? They have certain expectations about it. Maybe they have to rely on it. It's not that this thing is like super expensive necessarily. It's that they're relying on it. For example, let's say you're an electrician and, electricians have like a little device that detects live voltage, right? So before they go and touch a piece of metal that could be live, it could have lethal voltage on it, they take this little instrument that looks like a pen, right? Something like this, and then they touch it, right? And if there's live lethal voltage there, the thing will buzz and light up and make a sound and alert them, hey, this is live, don't touch it, right? And then they know, okay, I shouldn't touch that. I should go turn that off before I touch it, right? Now, the little device might not be very expensive. It might sell for $10, right? But there's a new company, somebody that's just working in their basement that's making these little devices, right? Okay, you could afford that. Yes, it's only $10 instead of $15 like the professional one. Sounds like a good deal, but do I trust my life to that? Whereas this $15 one, it's made by a reputable company. It's been around for 100 years. They've been producing these things the world over for 50 years. They're known as making great quality industry standard test, devices. So it's like, there's an element of trust. It's not that the customer can't afford it. The price might be correct, but the problem is that the customer doesn't trust you. You're new. I've never heard of your company before. I don't know if this thing is going to let me down, right? So that's another element, right? It's outside of what ChatGPT and stuff has been talking about, but that's a critical part of it. If you're brand new, maybe that's a problem for your customers. They don't want to buy from you. They'd rather buy from like the name brand because they've heard of them, right? So you could be up against something like that. There's no reason why your product couldn't succeed from a technical perspective. People need it. People see it. People could afford it. They do want it. They would pay more than that for it, but they won't because they don't trust you. You know what I'm saying? So that's what validation does. Validation checks for things like that, things that you might not have taken into account. And the proof of the pudding is in the tasting. if you've sold like X many units of it, it's hard for anyone to then tell you that's not going to work, right? It's hard for any investor, for example, to tell you, no, I don't believe in your idea. It's not going to work. It's like, well, it's kind of hard to challenge it when it's already succeeded. You know what I mean? So that's what validation does. That's why I highly recommend people think like this. Okay, Magic Bean says, with physical products, people have to pay something to use it. But with other products, we can afford to provide free options. At what point do you decide whether it should be free or paid or both? Excellent question. Once again, that's going to vary by product, by region, by industry, by who you are. You know what I mean? In my last example, I showed how who you are can be very important. It can totally change the game. You know what I mean? So that's what you have to figure out. Now, how do you figure this out? Well, there's two basic things you can do. One, you can observe what other people are doing, right? If somebody's been in the business for 20 years and they're doing it this way, there's probably a reason why they're doing it that way. You know, maybe they've experimented over the years and they found this is kind of the sweet spot, right? For them, for their product. So you could maybe use that as a starting point, right? And then the other thing you can do is you can probe. You can try different things. See if you provide a free option that's crippled, and you say pay to unlock the full featured capabilities of this thing. Or you could say, okay, I'm going to provide a free version that's fully functional, but it expires after 3 days, right? And then you have to pay to have it keep working, right? So there's many different ways of doing it. You try stuff, right? You look at what other people are doing. You can do your own research into it, but then at the end of the day, a lot of people just probe. The proof's in the pudding. Let's try it and see. So you create a situation where it's possible to do that. Perhaps you have one version of the product that goes to one country that's crippled, and then you pay to unlock. Another version goes to a different country, and it's the full featured product, but you pay to have it continue operating. You take the time limit off. And then you see, how does this affect your sales? Is sales greater in one or the other? Oh, like it suggests that this is the way to go? Okay, let's validate that. Let's swap them, right? Or something like that. Or do control groups, right? Like test samples, things like this. So there's all kinds of ways you can do it. The best thing to do is to learn how to start talking to people in your industry. That's a very easy way to do basic research. A lot of people, you can just talk to them and pick their brains. If they've been doing this for many years, they might be able to tell you a few things. So you have all these options. Okay, we are rapidly approaching the end of this. So if anybody has any last questions, get in the chat, ask me. Once again, a reminder, check out that course called the $100 MBA. Best bang for the buck around if you want to learn business, including a lot of this stuff. Really, really help you in your entrepreneurial ventures. So if your goal is to learn business and maybe even like found your own company and then stop working as an employee completely. You work for yourself. You have your own business, whether it's a one-person business you do yourself, or like a actual company with like you're managing a lot of people. Whatever your goals are, learning business is what will help. And a Master of Business Administration is the gold standard in, understanding business. So check that out. That's a very cheap option that I have provided. So there's a link in the description box to it, and also to a video where I explain, what the course is, how it works, and where it comes from, and you can go and you can learn all about it and check that out. So I created that because some people have a need for that. They're looking for a cheap but effective solution that they can do on their own. They don't have time to go back to school for a couple years. They don't want to pay 6 figures for it, or 5 figures on the cheap side for it, but they want the knowledge. So if that's you, Check that out. Right there. $100 MBA. And as I already said earlier, Bob's your uncle. Later today, in about 1 hour, I will be live again. I have a collaborative live stream with Abby from the YouTube channel Life Work Balance. She's a YouTuber. She's an ex-recruiter. So her and I get together every 2 weeks. We do a live stream together. It goes out live on both of our channels at the same time. And people can send in questions about how to get jobs and careers and stuff like that. And we answer everybody's question. And she's coming from a different perspective than I am. She's a recruiter. She has a long career in recruiting. So that's where she's coming from. I'm not a recruiter. I'm like a business guy. I've led companies and I've hired people and fired people. And that's where I'm coming from. So like what hiring managers look for in employees and like all this kind of stuff. So, we have two different perspectives. So when we answer your question together, sometimes you can get the benefit of having two different perspectives on the same idea. So check that out if you're into that kind of stuff. Otherwise, I will be back a week from right now, same time next week. And if you have any questions or you have any topic suggestions for me, let me know, and we can definitely talk about it. Okay, thanks to everybody who participated. You guys are awesome. Check out my course, and I will see you guys soon. Take care.